Milan glittered that night. The streets were wet from a light rain, reflecting the soft gold of street lamps and the white glare of luxury cars. Inside Il Vetro di Notte, the city's most expensive restaurant, everything shimmered, from the chandeliers to the cutlery polished to mirror perfection. Clara Wells sat at a corner table, trying not to fidget. The white linen beneath her hands felt too fine, too crisp for someone who still lived off a modest art restorer's salary. She wore a simple black dress, the best one she owned, and tried to look as though she belonged among the people whose laughter sounded like money. She checked her phone for the 5th time. 8:45 p.m. Ethan was late. Again. She took a sip of water, wishing it were wine but unwilling to order anything until he arrived. Every time the maitre d' walked by, she straightened, expecting to hear her name. Every time, it wasn't for her. When she caught her reflection in the glass window beside her, she almost didn't recognize herself. Nervous eyes, a smile stretched too thin. Miss Wells. A waiter approached politely. Would you like to order a drink while you wait? She shook her head. Just water, thank you. The waiter nodded and left her alone with her thoughts. A low hum of conversation filled the room, Italian and English blending together. Murmured deals, flirtations, laughter that sounded expensive. She felt like a mismatched piece in a perfect painting. Then, as she looked across the room, her eyes landed on a man seated at a private table near the far wall. He wasn't talking or smiling like the others. He was listening, or perhaps watching. His companions were 2 men in dark suits, both alert, scanning the room. The man at the center, however, radiated stillness, a kind that commanded attention without effort. He was tall, dark-haired, his suit a perfect fit. Even seated, his posture carried quiet authority. When one of the men leaned toward him and whispered something, he turned slightly, revealing his face. It was a strong face, chiseled features softened by intelligence. His gaze swept the room briefly before landing on her. For a second, she forgot how to breathe. Something electric passed between them, not recognition, but awareness. He looked at her, not through her like most men did. And when their eyes met, Clara had the strange, dizzying feeling that he already knew her. Heat crept up her neck, and she looked down quickly, pretending to study the menu. Her heart raced. Clara. She looked up. Ethan had finally arrived, 30 minutes late, as always. He kissed her cheek, perfunctory, and sat down. He smelled faintly of cologne and something floral. Lipstick. You're late, she said softly. Milan traffic, he replied, already reaching for the wine list. You know how it is. She didn't answer. She knew how it was, how his excuses always sounded polished, like his suits and his lies. He ordered a 2016 Barolo without asking what she wanted. When the waiter left, he finally looked at her. You look nice. Thank you, she said. Happy anniversary. He smiled a little. Right. Has it really been a year? Her heart sank at the lack of warmth in his tone. I got you something. She pushed a small wrapped box toward him. He hesitated. Ah, I left yours in the car. I'll give it to you later. Clara nodded, forcing a smile. She'd heard that one before. They ordered. He chose the most expensive dishes. She asked for pasta, the cheapest thing on the menu. While he talked about his job at the investment firm, deals, promotions, people she didn't know, her attention drifted again toward the corner table. The man in the dark suit was still there, but now he was facing her directly. Ethan's voice cut through her thoughts. Are you even listening to me? Sorry, she said. What were you saying? He sighed. I asked if you talked to your father about the investment opportunity. She frowned. Ethan, I told you, I'm not asking him to invest. It's his pension, not a plaything. 50,000 euros isn't much for him, Ethan said, his smile thin. No, she said firmly. He worked his whole life for that. His expression tightened. You don't have to be so defensive. I'm only trying to help. Help yourself, she said under her breath. What? Nothing. Before he could respond, a commotion erupted at the entrance. A woman in a red dress stormed in, arguing with a maitre d'. "He's here!" she shouted in accented English. "Don't you dare stop me!" Heads turned. Clara froze as the woman's furious gaze swept the room, and then locked on Ethan. Her voice broke with betrayal. "Ethan, tell them who I am." Clara's stomach dropped. Ethan's face drained of color. "Maria not here. Don't you Maria me," she spat. 3 months you promised to leave her. She pointed directly at Clara. "Does she know what you did in Rome? Does she know about the loans in her father's name?" Every head turned toward them. Clara's blood ran cold. "What is she talking about?" "It's not what it looks like," Ethan stammered, standing quickly. "She's delusional." "Delusional." Maria laughed bitterly. "You used her father's identity to take money from people you shouldn't have crossed. You're finished, Ethan." Security rushed over, trying to contain the scene. A waiter's tray crashed to the floor, glass shattering. Clara stood frozen, her entire world tilting. When Ethan turned toward her, pleading, she stepped back. "Don't," she whispered. "Clara, I can explain. Don't touch me." She grabbed her purse and ran, ignoring the whispers, the eyes, the embarrassment burning in her chest. She needed air. She needed out. Down the hall, she pushed open a door, the wrong one, and found herself in a private dining room. 3 men stood around a table covered in maps and papers. 2 of them reached inside their jackets instantly, but the third, the man she'd noticed earlier, lifted a hand. "Wait." His deep voice cut through the tension. Clara froze. "I'm so sorry," she stammered. "Wrong door." But before she could turn, a hand gripped her arm. "Ethan again." "There you are," he hissed. "Let's go." The man at the table looked up slowly, his gaze sharp as glass. His tone was calm, but deadly. "Remove your hand," he said to Ethan. Ethan blinked. "Excuse me," I said. The man leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. "Remove your hand from her." For a second, no one moved. Then Ethan, realizing who he was dealing with, released her immediately. "Mr. DeSantis," he said weakly. "I didn't mean any disrespect." Lorenzo DeSantis's expression didn't change. "And yet you managed plenty." He turned his gaze to Clara. "You're shaking," he said quietly. "Sit." But she couldn't move. Every instinct told her she was in danger. And yet, another part of her, a quieter, reckless part, felt oddly safe under his watch. Ethan mumbled an apology and tried to take her again. Lorenzo's voice came like a knife through the air. "If you value your life, don't touch her again." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Ethan's breath seemed to stop. Then Lorenzo nodded to one of his men. "See that he leaves." Ethan paled as 2 large men stepped forward. Clara didn't watch what happened next. She just stood, trembling, unable to speak. "Come," Lorenzo said, his voice softer now. "You shouldn't be out there." And before she could protest, the stranger everyone in that room obeyed escorted her away, into a world she never meant to enter. The restaurant's private corridors felt like another world, quieter, colder, the air thick with the smell of cigars and expensive cologne. Lorenzo walked beside her, his pace unhurried. The 2 men who'd accompanied him earlier trailed behind. "Are you all right?" he asked without looking at her. Clara swallowed hard. Yes. I think so. You shouldn't have been near that man." Her chest tightened. "He was my boyfriend." He glanced at her then, eyes sharp and unreadable. "Was?" She bristled slightly. "You don't even know me." "I know the type of man he is," Lorenzo said simply. "Men who steal from others while pretending to love them, I know them well." His calm certainty left her silent. They entered another room, a smaller one, dimly lit, with dark wood and glass walls overlooking the city. A single decanter of amber liquid sat on a desk. Lorenzo gestured to a chair. "Sit." She hesitated. "I really should go." "If you leave," he interrupted, Someone will follow you. Your boyfriend has made enemies. You're connected to him now. That makes you a target. Her knees gave out before her courage did. She sank into the chair. What enemies? Men you don't want to meet, he said, pouring 2 glasses of whiskey. Drink. It helps with the shaking. She stared at the glass but didn't touch it. Who are you? Lorenzo DeSantis. The name felt heavy, one she'd heard whispered around the gallery in Milan, associated with impossible money and silent influence. The DeSantis Group, she said slowly. You own half the ports in northern Italy. He smiled faintly. And the other half obeys my phone calls. Her breath caught. Why are you helping me? He studied her. Because your boyfriend owes money to a man I do business with. He used your father's identity to secure the loans. That puts you both in danger. Clara stared, stunned. How do you know that? I know everything that happens in my city. His voice was matter-of-fact, not boastful. And I don't enjoy seeing innocent people destroyed because of fools. She blinked hard, trying to keep her composure. What do you want from me? Nothing, he said, but the way he said it made her unsure if that was true. At least, not yet. Lorenzo leaned back in his chair. You will go home tonight. But from this moment, you are under my protection. If anyone contacts you, you call this number. He slid a black card across the table. She didn't touch it. I can't get involved in whatever this is. You already are. Their eyes met, hers full of confusion, his calm but with something darker simmering beneath. Why me? She whispered. His answer was simple. Because you looked at me when no one else dared. She froze. He stood, buttoning his jacket. I'll have my driver take you home. I don't need. You do. He turned toward the door. The streets aren't safe tonight. Not for you. She followed him out, silent, overwhelmed. As they reached the restaurant's entrance, she saw Ethan outside, surrounded by 2 suited men. He was shouting, panicked. Lorenzo's men ignored him. When Ethan's eyes met hers, he called out, Clara, please. You don't know what he is. She didn't answer. Lorenzo opened the car door himself. Get in. Clara hesitated, glancing between the 2 men, one familiar, one terrifyingly unknown. Lorenzo's voice dropped to a murmur meant only for her. You can walk back to your old life, where he'll drag you down again, or step into mine, where no one will touch you without my permission. Something in his tone, not cruelty, but certainty, made her spine tingle. And though she didn't understand why, she stepped into the car. The door closed with a soft click, sealing her decision. As the car moved through the Milan night, the city lights blurred into streaks of gold and silver. Lorenzo sat beside her, silent, his profile sharp against the glass. She finally spoke. You said he made enemies. What happens now? His gaze stayed on the passing streets. Now, you go home. You call your father. And you wait for my instructions. She swallowed. And Ethan. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, softly, too softly, Lorenzo said, Ethan will be handled. She didn't ask what that meant. She didn't need to. When the car stopped outside her apartment, Lorenzo looked at her fully for the first time since they'd left. You're afraid, he said quietly. Shouldn't I be? Yes, he replied. But not of me. He handed her the black card again. Keep this near you. When the time comes, you'll know why. Their eyes met, a brief, charged moment of understanding between 2 strangers bound by circumstance and something neither could name. Then he nodded to the driver. The car door opened. Clara stepped out into the cool night air, the card trembling in her hand. As the car pulled away, she caught one last glimpse of Lorenzo's reflection in the window, composed, unreadable, yet unmistakably watching her. And in that instant, she realized the truth she couldn't yet explain. She hadn't escaped the danger. She just met it, in the form of a man whose protection might be more dangerous than any threat outside. Clara barely slept. When morning sunlight crept through her apartment window, she was still sitting on the couch, the black business card resting on the table in front of her. It was so simple, a name embossed in silver, a single phone number beneath it. Lorenzo de Santis. She told herself not to call, not to think about him, but his words replayed in her head. You're connected to him now. That makes you a target. At 9, she called her father in London. He was cheerful as always, asking about her work at the gallery. But when she cautiously asked if Ethan had asked him to sign anything or transfer funds, her father hesitated. Well, he mentioned something about a small investment, he admitted. Said it was an opportunity for you both. I was going to ask your opinion before signing anything. Her chest tightened. Dad, promise me you won't sign anything. Please. It's important. He sounded puzzled but concerned. All right, pumpkin. I promise. But are you in some kind of trouble? Clara forced a steady tone. Nothing I can't handle. Just trust me. When she hung up, her hands trembled. Whatever Ethan had done, it had spread farther than she'd realized. She made herself tea, trying to calm down. But halfway through her first sip, there was a knock at the door. 3 quiet knocks. Then a pause. Then one more. She froze. Peering through the peephole, she saw a man in a dark suit she didn't recognize. His expression was neutral but alert, as if he was waiting for something. Miss Wells. His voice was calm, professional. Mr. De Santis sent me. Her heart skipped. Why? It would be better if we spoke downstairs, he said. Clara hesitated, torn between fear and instinct. She remembered Lorenzo's warning. Someone will follow you. Grabbing her coat, she followed the man downstairs to a black car idling at the curb. The driver opened the back door. Inside sat Lorenzo de Santis. He looked the same as last night, composed, tailored, every movement precise. The difference was daylight. Somehow, he looked even more dangerous in it. Get in, he said quietly. Her pulse raced, but she obeyed. The door shut behind her with a soft thud. I told you someone would contact you, he said. Ethan tried to access your father's accounts this morning. My people intercepted it. Clara blinked. How do you even know that? I have friends in places where information travels fast, Lorenzo said simply. The important thing is that your father is still safe, for now. For now. He turned to face her, his expression unreadable. Your father's name is on documents connected to stolen funds. That makes him a liability to certain people who don't handle betrayal well. A chill went through her. You mean? I mean there are people who might come asking questions you can't afford to answer. Clara's voice trembled. So what do I do? You let me handle it. He leaned forward slightly, eyes fixed on hers. You and your father will stay somewhere secure until this is resolved. Stay where? My home outside Milan. It's private and protected. Her heart thudded. Protected from who? He didn't answer that directly. Instead, he said, I give my word that you'll be safe. But I need your cooperation. She looked away, torn between fear and disbelief. I barely know you. And yet, he said quietly, you're still in this car. Clara met his gaze. Because I don't have another choice. A faint smile touched his lips. You always have choices, Miss Wells. Some are just worse than others. The car turned onto a quiet street lined with old stone buildings. Lorenzo spoke again, more softly now. I know you don't trust me. But trust this, if you stay where you are, you and your father will be in danger. If you come with me, you'll be under my protection. I won't let anyone touch you. His tone wasn't boastful. It was a promise. Clara studied him, searching for deceit. But there was only that calm certainty that made her heart race in equal parts fear and something else she couldn't name. Why? She whispered. Why are you helping me? Lorenzo's eyes softened just enough to be human. Because I can. And because your boyfriend's actions crossed into my world. Now, that makes you part of it. She shook her head. I don't want to be part of your world. Neither did I, he said quietly, and the hint of pain in his voice surprised her. For a moment, neither spoke. The city gave way to countryside, sunlight flickering through olive trees as the car sped north. Clara stared out the window, the weight of everything pressing down. A week ago, her life had been simple: art, coffee, quiet days in the gallery. Now, she was in a car with a man whose protection felt like both a gift and a threat. As if sensing her turmoil, Lorenzo said, "You'll have time to adjust. My home isn't a prison." She almost laughed. "You expect me to believe that? You'll see soon enough." The rest of the drive passed in silence, a silence full of unspoken questions neither dared ask. By late afternoon, the car rolled through iron gates flanked by tall cypress trees. Beyond them, a villa appeared, a breathtaking stretch of white stone overlooking the shimmer of Lake Como. Clara stared through the window, speechless. The place was enormous, like something out of an old film. Fountains, gardens, terraces spilling down toward the water. "This is your home," she managed. "One of them," Lorenzo said. The car stopped before wide marble steps. A woman in her 50s, elegant in a dark dress, waited at the entrance. "Miss Wells," she greeted warmly, her accent soft. "I'm Signora Rossi, Mr. DeSantis's house manager. Welcome." "Thank you," Clara murmured, still dazed. Inside, the villa was even more stunning. High ceilings, Renaissance paintings, the scent of polished wood and lavender. It felt like walking into another century. A man appeared carrying her small suitcase, which she hadn't even noticed being taken from the car. "Your room is prepared," Signora Rossi said. "Mr. DeSantis asked me to ensure you have everything you need." Clara followed her upstairs, past tall windows overlooking the lake. The bedroom was larger than her entire apartment. Cream-colored walls, a balcony draped in sunlight. A vase of white lilies stood by the bed. On the dresser, a small box waited, tied with emerald ribbon. "What is that?" she asked. "A gift," Signora Rossi said. "From Mr. DeSantis." When the woman left, Clara approached the box slowly. Inside lay a phone, a keycard, and a note written in clean, slanted handwriting. "For communication and entry. You're safe here. L." She sank onto the edge of the bed, overwhelmed. The word felt strange here, surrounded by so much beauty that somehow still felt like a cage. A soft knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she said. Lorenzo entered, no longer in his suit jacket, sleeves rolled neatly up. He looked less formal, but no less composed. "You've settled in?" "It's beautiful," she said honestly. "But unnecessary. I can stay somewhere smaller." He shook his head. "No. You stay here." She met his gaze. "You keep saying that like it's an order." "It is." Clara folded her arms. "You can't just decide where I live. I can when your safety depends on it." Her frustration broke through. "I didn't ask for your help." He stepped closer, voice calm but firm. "You didn't have to. I don't do this out of charity, Clara. I do it because your situation affects things beyond you. And because I don't like seeing people used." She swallowed, heart racing. "And what do you want in return?" His expression softened slightly. "I haven't decided yet." That answer startled her more than anything. He studied her a moment longer. "Dinner is at 8. Signora Rossi will show you the way." When he turned to leave, she said quietly, "You make it sound like I'm your guest. Or your prisoner." He paused in the doorway. "A guest chooses to stay. A prisoner can't leave. You, Miss Wells, are free to decide which you'd rather be." Then he was gone. At dinner, the villa was bathed in golden light. A long table overlooked the gardens, candles flickering in silver holders. Lorenzo waited at the far end, his usual calm intact. "Sit," he said as she entered. The food was flawless, served by quiet staff who disappeared almost invisibly. For a while, they ate in silence until Clara couldn't take it anymore. "What happens next?" she asked. "You stay here until I've cleared your father's name," Lorenzo said. "I've already spoken to a lawyer. Your father will be contacted soon, but not by Ethan. That man won't bother either of you again." Clara frowned. "How can you be sure?" "I have ways of discouraging persistence." Something in his tone made her uneasy. "You mean threats?" He looked at her steadily. "I mean persuasion. You'd be surprised what people will give up when they realize there's nothing left to win." She stared at him, both fascinated and unsettled by how casually he spoke about control. "I don't understand you," she said finally. "That's all right," he replied. "You're not supposed to. Why help me, then? What do you gain from this?" His eyes lingered on her face. "Perhaps I like balance. Your ex-boyfriend took something that wasn't his. I'm simply restoring the order he broke." There was more to it, she could feel it, but she didn't push. After dinner, he led her onto the terrace. The night air was cool and smelled faintly of jasmine. Below, the lake shimmered under the moonlight. "This view," Clara whispered. "It's like a painting." He nodded. "That's why I keep it. It reminds me there's still beauty in things that can't be controlled." She looked at him, surprised. "I wouldn't have thought you believed that." "I don't," he said. "But sometimes I like to pretend." Their eyes met. For a moment, the air between them tightened, not just with fear or gratitude, but something unspoken. Lorenzo's gaze dropped briefly to her trembling hands. "You're still afraid." "A little. Of me. Of everything." He stepped closer, but not enough to touch her. "Fear keeps you alert. But don't let it make your choices for you." "What should I make them with, then?" "Instinct," he said. "It's rarely wrong." He turned toward the doorway. "Rest. Tomorrow, you'll speak with your father. After that, I'll explain what needs to happen." "And if I say no?" Lorenzo paused, the faintest smile touching his lips. "Then I'll still protect you. But I'll be disappointed." When he left her standing on the terrace, Clara stared out at the dark water, trying to understand the man who had appeared from nowhere and rearranged her life with calm certainty. The lake reflected the moon, silver and perfect, beautiful but unreachable. And as the night wind stirred her hair, she realized the truth she hadn't wanted to admit. Part of her didn't want to run. Part of her wanted to understand him. Maybe even trust him. The villa had its own rhythm, one that did not wait for newcomers to catch up. Servants moved like ghosts. Meals appeared and vanished. Doors stayed closed unless someone else opened them. Clara tried to find a routine. She spent mornings walking the gardens and afternoons exploring the small library, pretending she was on holiday rather than hidden away in a stranger's estate. But she could feel eyes on her wherever she went, polite, professional, but always watching. Every evening, Lorenzo appeared. Never announced, never hurried. He would ask if she had eaten, whether she had spoken to her father, if she was comfortable. Then he would disappear again into a world of phone calls and meetings she couldn't name. On the fourth day, she caught him in the library. He was standing by a window, jacket off, sleeves rolled high, reading through a folder of papers. For once, he looked almost human, the faintest shadow under his eyes, a crease between his brows. "You work too much," she said quietly. He looked up, surprised, then smiled slightly. "And you speak more freely now." "I suppose I'm getting used to the walls," she said, joining him by the window. "They don't echo as much anymore." "They were built for privacy," he said. "They feel like secrets." He shut the folder. "Perhaps both." Clara studied him. "What exactly do you do, Lorenzo? Everyone here treats you like, I don't even know, like you run a small country." He met her eyes without flinching. "I manage businesses. Shipping, investment, property. Nothing dramatic." That's not an answer. He gave a faint, almost amused sigh. And you, Miss Wells, are a restorer. You take broken things and make them whole again. So perhaps we are similar, only our materials differ. She smiled a little at that. And what am I here to restore? Your father's name. Your sense of safety. He paused, voice lower. Maybe something else you don't know yet. The way he said it made her pulse quicken. A maid appeared at the doorway. Señor DeSantis, the car is ready. He nodded and turned back to Clara. There's a small art collection here, in the East Wing. It's been neglected for years. If you're restless, perhaps you could look at it. Is that permission or another order? She teased. He gave that quiet half-smile again. Call it a compromise. The East Wing gallery smelled of dust and oil paint. Heavy curtains kept out most of the light, and rows of framed canvases leaned against the walls, forgotten. Clara felt a strange calm as she unwrapped them, one by one. Portraits, landscapes, studies, nothing priceless, but full of history. By sunset, she had lost herself in the work. When she finally turned, Lorenzo was standing in the doorway watching her. You were right, she said, wiping her hands. They're beautiful, but they need care. I thought you might see that, he said softly. You look more alive here than anywhere else in this house. She felt a blush rise. Art makes sense. People don't. People rarely do. He stepped closer, his voice quiet but intent. You've been here 4 days and still haven't asked when you can leave. I figured you'd tell me when it was safe, she said. He studied her face. Safe isn't a place, Clara. It's a person. Or a promise. Their eyes locked for a moment that seemed to stretch far longer than it should have. Then he turned away, breaking the spell. Dinner at 8, he said. Don't work too late. When he left, she stood staring at the doorway long after his footsteps faded. That night, she couldn't sleep. The moonlight poured through her balcony doors, turning the room silver. She walked to the window and looked out over the lake. Somewhere down the hill, lights glowed from another part of the estate. He was still awake. Without thinking, she slipped on a shawl and padded quietly down the corridor, her bare feet silent on the marble. She told herself she was only going to thank him for letting her work in the gallery. But she knew that wasn't the truth. When she reached his study, the door was ajar. She hesitated, then knocked lightly. Come in, he said. He sat behind his desk, papers scattered before him. The glow from a single lamp cast warm shadows across his face. I didn't mean to disturb you, she said. I just couldn't sleep. Neither could I. He gestured to the chair opposite him. Sit. For a few seconds, neither spoke. She could hear the faint hum of crickets outside, the ticking of a clock. Finally, he said, You're still afraid of me. She shook her head slowly. Not afraid. Just aware. He studied her carefully. That's wise. Tell me something honest, she said suddenly. Something no one else knows. He leaned back, thinking. I once tried to paint, he said. I was terrible. She laughed softly. That's not much of a confession. It is for a man who hates failure. Their eyes met again, and she saw it, a crack in his composure, a flash of loneliness hidden beneath control. Before she could speak, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, his jaw tightening. Excuse me. He stepped out to take the call, voice low and sharp in Italian. When he returned, the calm mask was back. Is everything all right? She asked. It will be, he said, though his tone said otherwise. Go back to bed, Clara. She stood but lingered at the doorway. You never answer a question directly. He smiled faintly. That's how I stay alive. And though she didn't know why, that answer frightened her more than any threat could have. The next morning, the villa felt different. The staff moved faster, voices hushed. From the balcony, Clara could see cars arriving at the far end of the property. When she came downstairs, Signora Rossi intercepted her. Best to stay inside today, the woman said gently. Mr. DeSantis has visitors. What kind of visitors? The kind who don't appreciate interruptions. Clara tried to focus on the gallery but couldn't. Every hour, new cars arrived. She caught glimpses of serious-looking men in suits. It felt like the house itself was holding its breath. By late afternoon, she decided to escape to the garden. As she crossed the terrace, voices drifted from a side corridor, Lorenzo's, low and steady, and another man's, louder, angry. You made promises, Lorenzo, the other voice said. We all depend on you keeping them. I always do, Lorenzo replied. But some things require patience. Patience. The man laughed bitterly. Or distraction. Footsteps moved closer. Clara ducked behind a marble column just as the two men stepped into view. The stranger was tall, his expression hard. He looked like someone used to getting what he wanted. When he left, Lorenzo stayed still for a long moment, his shoulders tight. Then he noticed her. Listening, Miss Wells? She stepped out, embarrassed. I didn't mean to. I told you to stay inside. I wanted air. And I wasn't spying. He exhaled slowly, the tension easing a little. I know. You just have unfortunate timing. Who was that? She asked. A business partner. He forgets manners when he's nervous. You made him nervous? Everyone is nervous around someone they can't predict. Clara tilted her head. Are you predictable? He almost smiled. Not even to myself. They walked along the terrace in silence. The lake glittered below them, perfectly calm despite the storm brewing between them. Finally, she said, You can't keep pretending I'm not curious about what's happening here. I deserve to know why I'm really here. Lorenzo stopped. You're here because people connected to Ethan still want something from your father. Until I know who, I can't let you leave. So you're protecting me. Yes. And if I didn't want your protection? He looked at her, eyes dark. Then you'd already be gone, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. His bluntness stunned her. You make everything sound so final. It's easier that way, he said quietly. Uncertainty gets people hurt. Clara turned toward the lake. You talk like someone who's been hurt. He didn't answer. When she looked back, his expression had softened again. Come to dinner tonight, he said. Proper dinner, not formality. Just us. All right. That evening, the dining room felt different. Only one candle burned between them, its light flickering against the glass. Lorenzo poured wine. To new beginnings, he said. She smiled. That's optimistic. I can be, when I choose. For a while, they ate quietly, and Clara found herself relaxing. He spoke about his travels, his interest in architecture, his belief that everything beautiful hides a flaw if you look closely enough. And people? She asked. Do they hide flaws too? They are flaws, he said with a small smile. But some make the world more interesting. When she laughed, his gaze lingered on her. You haven't laughed like that since you arrived. I didn't have much reason before. Then I'll make sure you do. The words hung in the air, heavier than he intended. She looked down at her glass, suddenly nervous. Why are you really doing this? She asked. You could have left me to clean up the mess on my own. He studied her for a long time before answering. Because the first time I saw you, you looked at me without fear. People rarely do that. You reminded me of someone I used to be. The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. Who? A man who believed he could change everything. She wanted to ask more, but the vulnerability on his face stopped her. Instead, she said softly, Maybe that man's still there. He shook his head, smiling faintly. No, but you are. And that's enough. They sat in silence, the tension between them shifting, no longer built on fear, but something slower, warmer, infinitely more dangerous. When dinner ended, he stood and offered his hand. Walk with me. Outside, the air was cool. They stopped by the fountain, its water catching moonlight like scattered diamonds. "You could leave tomorrow," he said quietly. "You could take your father and disappear. But if you do, I can't promise you'll be safe." Clara looked up at him. "And if I stay, then you'll be safe. But it means trusting me completely." She hesitated. That sounds like a choice between two kinds of cages. Lorenzo reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "A cage only exists if you stop wanting to be there." The gesture was gentle, almost reverent, yet charged with something unspoken. For a long moment, neither moved. The world shrank to the space between them, a heartbeat, a breath, a possibility. Then he stepped back, control returning to his voice. "Good night, Clara." She watched him walk away, his silhouette framed by the moonlight. Inside, alone again, she realized her hands were trembling, not from fear this time, but from everything she hadn't said. She looked out at the lake once more. Somewhere beneath the calm surface, she sensed the beginning of a storm, one that had already started inside her. Morning broke quietly over the lake, the air cool and clear. From her balcony, Clara watched sunlight ripple across the water. For a moment, she allowed herself to forget why she was here. The illusion ended when she noticed the two guards stationed at the gate below. They weren't subtle anymore. Someone, somewhere, had made Lorenzo uneasy. At breakfast, Signora Rossi served coffee and fruit as if nothing were wrong. "Mr. DeSantis has gone to the city," she said. "He will return before evening." Clara nodded, though a knot tightened in her chest. She had grown used to his steady presence. Without it, the villa felt hollow. She spent the morning in the gallery, brushing dust from old frames. The quiet should have soothed her, but her thoughts kept circling the same questions. Who were these people Lorenzo feared? And what had Ethan done that could cause all this? Around noon, she heard footsteps. Expecting Signora Rossi, she looked up and froze. A man she didn't know stood in the doorway. He wasn't dressed like the staff. Dark jeans, leather jacket, sharp eyes that moved too quickly. "Can I help you?" she asked, setting down her brush. He smiled, too casually. "I'm here to collect something that belongs to my employer." "You must have the wrong house," Clara said, taking a cautious step back. "No," he said. "You're exactly where you shouldn't be." Before she could move, another voice cut through the room. "Enough." Lorenzo stood behind the intruder, calm but cold. Two guards appeared from nowhere. In seconds, the man's hands were behind his back. "Who sent you?" Lorenzo asked. The intruder didn't answer. Lorenzo gave a small nod. The guards led the man out without another word. When they were gone, the silence in the gallery was deafening. Clara stared at him. "Who was that?" "A reminder," he said quietly. "Of what?" "That the past never stays buried." She swallowed. "He was here for me, wasn't he?" Lorenzo didn't deny it. He took a slow breath, as if choosing his words. "The people Ethan worked with don't like losing money. They found a connection, your father's name, and now they're looking for leverage." Clara's voice shook. "And I'm the leverage." His eyes softened. "You were. Not anymore." "You can't promise that," she said. "He found me here. He won't again." The way he said it made her shiver. There was steel in his calmness, but underneath it, something else. Fear for her. "Come with me," he said. He led her outside, past the gardens, to the boathouse by the lake. The sunlight danced on the water, throwing reflections onto the wooden beams. "This place," he said, "was my grandfather's. He built it after the war. He used to tell me the lake keeps secrets better than people do." Clara looked around. "It's beautiful. It's safe," he said. "That matters more." She turned to him. "I don't understand how you can stay so calm." He smiled faintly. "I learned early that panic makes you a target." "And what makes you safe?" He looked at her for a long moment. Control. The word hung between them. When they walked back to the house, the air felt heavier. Lorenzo spoke to one of his guards in a low voice. Then to her he said, "You'll move to the main wing tonight. Closer to my quarters. There are too many entrances in this part of the house." "I don't want to hide behind you forever," she said. He studied her face. "It isn't forever." But they both knew he couldn't promise that. That evening, she moved her things to a new room. It was smaller, nearer to his study, and overlooked the courtyard instead of the lake. She felt both safer and more trapped. When he came to check on her, she was unpacking books onto a low shelf. "You don't have to stay here all the time," he said. "You can walk in the gardens, use the library. Just not alone." "Do you ever get tired of giving orders?" she asked. "Only when people ignore them," he said with a hint of humor. She smiled despite herself. "You make it sound easy." "It isn't," he said softly. Their eyes met. Something in his expression had changed, less guarded, more human. "You should rest," he said. "Tomorrow will be quieter." "How can you know that?" "I make it my business to know." And for the first time, she realized he meant it literally. The next morning dawned bright and still. No cars, no strange visitors, no anxious whispers. The villa seemed to exhale. Clara spent the day in the garden, sketching the view of the lake. The rhythm of pencil on paper soothed her. For the first time in days, she felt almost normal. When she looked up, Lorenzo was standing at the edge of the path. "You draw," he said, walking closer. "Not professionally," she said. "It helps me think." He glanced at the sketch. "You make this place look peaceful." "It could be," she said, "if people stopped bringing their ghosts here." He smiled slightly. "Some ghosts are loyal. They never leave." She looked at him. "You talk like you know them well." "I do." He hesitated, then said, "There's something I need to tell you. Last night's visitor wasn't random. The people behind Ethan's debts, they're watching the house. My security can handle it, but it means I can't let you travel to Milan for now." "I haven't left the property in weeks," she said. "I know," he said gently. "And I'm asking you to be patient a little longer." "Patience isn't the problem," she said. "Feeling powerless is." He studied her for a moment. "Then let me give you some control." "How?" "Help me find out where Ethan went wrong. You knew him. You worked with him. You'll recognize things I won't." She hesitated, then nodded. "All right." They spent the afternoon going through a folder of documents Lorenzo's people had collected, emails, copies of contracts, bank transfers. The more Clara read, the clearer the pattern became. Ethan hadn't stumbled into trouble. He had built it, step by step, out of greed. At one point, her hand began to shake. "He used my father's account," she whispered. "All of this. He signed it with Dad's name." Lorenzo looked up. "Then we have what we need to clear your father. I'll make sure of it." She met his gaze. "Why does it matter so much to you?" He hesitated. "Because once, someone I cared about was blamed for something they didn't do. I couldn't save them. Maybe this is my chance to make it right." The honesty in his voice disarmed her. "You lost someone?" "Yes." "I'm sorry." "So am I," he said quietly. "Every day." The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. They worked until sunset, the light turning gold across the room. When she closed the last folder, her eyes were tired. "That's enough for today," he said. "You need rest." "I'd rather stay busy," she admitted. "It keeps the fear quiet." He looked at her for a long moment, then said softly, "Come with me." He led her to the terrace overlooking the water. The evening was warm, the air filled with the scent of jasmine. "You see that light?" he said, pointing to a distant village across the lake. "When I was a boy, I used to imagine there was another version of me living there, someone free of all this." "And now?" she asked. "Now I know there's no such thing as free." She turned toward him. Maybe not. But you can choose what to hold on to. Like what? Moments, she said. The good ones. Before everything changes. He smiled faintly. You make that sound simple. It isn't, she said. But it's possible. The light faded slowly. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then, without warning, a gust of wind caught her shawl, pulling it from her shoulders. Lorenzo reached out to steady her, and his hand brushed her arm. The contact was small, accidental, but the effect was immediate. Her breath caught. He froze, eyes locked on hers. For the first time, the perfect calm cracked. There was a question there, silent but unmistakable. She didn't move away. He stepped closer, slowly, giving her every chance to stop him. When he finally touched her cheek, his fingers were warm, careful. Tell me to stop, he said quietly. She didn't. The distance between them vanished. The kiss was gentle at first, almost hesitant, then deepened as if both had been holding their breath for too long. When he pulled back, his voice was rough. You shouldn't trust me this much. I don't, she said, still breathless. But I wanted to. A faint smile touched his lips. That's more dangerous than fear. I know. They stood there, the lake reflecting the last light of day. For once, there was no past or future, only this fragile, stolen present. Lorenzo stepped back finally, regaining his composure. You should rest, he said again, though his voice had lost its usual certainty. She nodded, still dazed. Good night. When she turned to leave, he caught her hand for a second. Clara. She looked back. Whatever happens next, he said, don't forget that I meant this. Then he released her. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she felt the warmth of his touch, the quiet intensity of his voice. She knew it was madness to let herself fall into whatever this was, but her heart refused to listen. Downstairs, alone in his study, Lorenzo poured himself a drink he didn't need. His hands were steady, but his thoughts were not. He had spent his life keeping emotion out of every decision. Yet one woman, one moment, had undone years of control. He looked toward the lake and whispered to the empty room, You're making me weak. But deep down, he knew it wasn't weakness at all. It was the first thing in years that felt real. Morning came in a pale wash of light over the hills. Clara woke early, the memory of Lorenzo's kiss still humming through her. The villa was quiet. The only sound was the steady rhythm of waves on the shore below. She dressed quickly and went to the library, hoping work would steady her mind. She hadn't been there long when footsteps approached. Lorenzo entered, phone in hand, his expression unreadable. You're up early, he said. I couldn't sleep. He placed the phone on the desk. Something's happened. Ethan has been seen in Milan. Clara's pulse jumped. You're sure? My people traced a card he used last night. He looked at her carefully. He tried to withdraw money connected to your father's account again. She felt sick. I thought you stopped him. I did. But some people don't learn until they have nowhere left to run. What will you do? Find him before someone else does. He paused. I need you to stay inside the villa today. Promise me that. She nodded. All right. When he left, the silence closed around her again. But fear sat heavy in her chest. If Ethan had resurfaced, everything could unravel. By afternoon, the weather changed. Wind swept across the lake, rattling the shutters. She went to close one when she saw movement near the gate. 2 cars, one black, one silver, parked side by side. Strangers stepped out, speaking quickly into phones. A prickle of unease crawled up her spine. She found Signora Rossi in the corridor. There are people at the gate, Clara said. The woman's face went pale. Inside. Now. Before Clara could move, a shout came from outside, followed by the echo of running feet. She heard one of the guards yelling orders, then the sharp bark of engines starting. Stay in your room, Signora Rossi urged. But Clara turned toward the stairs instead. Her instincts screamed to find Lorenzo. She reached the entrance just as the doors opened. Lorenzo strode in, rein on his coat, voice low and steady as he spoke to one of his men. When he saw her, his expression hardened. "What are you doing here?" "I saw people." "They're gone," he said. "They tried to force the gate. They won't try again." "Were they after me?" "Yes." He rubbed a hand over his face, the first real sign of strain she'd seen in him. "You're moving to the inner wing. There's no argument this time." She hesitated. "How bad is it?" He met her eyes. "Bad enough that I can't risk you leaving the house again." She wanted to argue, but the tension in his voice stopped her. "What about Ethan?" Lorenzo's gaze darkened. "If he's working with them, he's already in danger." "Then let me talk to him," she said impulsively. "Maybe I can make him stop." "No," Lorenzo said sharply. "He'll use you. He always has." "I can try." He cut her off, his tone softer but final. "Clara, if you walk toward that man again, you may not come back. Do you understand?" Her throat tightened. She nodded. "Good," he said quietly. "Now promise me you'll stay inside tonight." "I promise." He exhaled and touched her arm, a brief, steadying gesture. "I'll take care of this." That night, the storm broke fully. Rain pounded the windows, thunder rolling over the lake. Clara paced her room, staring at her phone, tempted to call Lorenzo but afraid of distracting him. Hours passed before the door opened. He stood there, soaked, exhausted, eyes darker than she'd ever seen them. "Did you find him?" she asked. "Yes." "What happened?" "He ran." She stepped closer. "And you let him?" "He wasn't alone. The people who came today were his shield. They'll turn on him soon enough." Clara sank onto the couch, the weight of everything crashing down. "This is my fault," she whispered. "No," Lorenzo said, crossing the room. "It's his. He chose this. But he used my family." He crouched in front of her, voice calm. "You did nothing wrong. You trusted the wrong man. That isn't a crime." Her eyes stung. "It feels like one." Without thinking, he reached for her hand. "You're safe now. That's all that matters." Outside, thunder rolled again. She looked at him, the man who had taken over her life and somehow become its anchor. "Why do you care so much?" she asked quietly. "Because I know what it's like to have everything you care about threatened," he said. "And because I don't want that to happen to you." The storm raged beyond the windows, but inside, the air was still. Neither moved. When he finally stood, she caught his sleeve. "Don't go back out tonight." He hesitated, then nodded. "I won't." He stayed until the storm faded, sitting silently nearby as she drifted into uneasy sleep. Clara woke late to sunlight cutting through the curtains. For a moment, she thought the night before had been a dream. But then she saw the cup of tea on the table, still warm, and knew he'd kept his word. When she stepped into the hallway, she found him waiting near the staircase, dressed and composed as if nothing had happened. "Good morning," he said. "You didn't sleep." He smiled faintly. "I don't need much." They ate breakfast together in the conservatory. Birds flitted through the garden beyond the glass. For a little while, it felt like normal life. "Any news?" she asked finally. "Ethan has disappeared," he said. "But his name will no longer touch your father's records. I made sure of it." "You fixed everything?" "Almost." She set down her fork. "Then I suppose I should thank you." "You don't have to," he said. "Just don't run from what you've started." She frowned. "What do you mean?" He looked directly at her. "Us." The word hung in the air like a spark. "I don't know what this is," she said. "It's real," he replied. "And it's yours if you want it." Her heart raced. "You move too fast." "I waited my whole life for something to feel right," he said softly. You showed up and made everything make sense again. She didn't know how to answer. Instead, she stood and walked toward the window. The lake glimmered outside, calm now after the storm. You saved me, she said quietly. But I can't be something you own. He came up behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth. You're not something I own, he said. You're something I protect. Those sound the same, she whispered. They aren't. She turned to face him. And if I wanted to go back to my life? He studied her, then said, I'd let you. But I'd make sure you had a way back to me. There was no arrogance in his tone, only certainty. She sighed. You make everything sound inevitable. Because some things are. For a long time, they stood there in silence. Then he said, Come with me. There's something I want to show you. He led her through a narrow hallway to a part of the villa she hadn't seen before. The door opened onto a wide balcony overlooking the entire valley. Below, the garden spread like green silk, and the lake shone like glass. This view, he said, is where I make decisions. When I doubt, I come here. And what do you see? She asked. Everything I could lose. She looked at him. Including me? Yes, he said simply. A strange stillness settled between them. Then, without thinking, she reached for his hand. I'm tired of being afraid, she said. Whatever happens next, I want to face it with you. He squeezed her fingers gently. Then that's what we'll do. That evening, they dined alone again. The food went untouched. Words mattered more. You've changed since you came here, he said. When I first saw you, you looked like someone about to break. Maybe I did break, she said. Maybe that's how people change. You didn't break, he said quietly. You adapted. She smiled faintly. You sound almost proud. I am. They moved to the terrace afterward, where the night air was cool and still. Fireflies drifted in the darkness. Clara, he said after a long pause. I need to tell you something before someone else does. Her stomach tightened. What? Your ex didn't act alone. There's someone higher up who pushed him into it. The same person who sent those men here. I don't know his name yet. Does that mean we're still in danger? It means I'm not finished, he said. Then I'm not leaving, she said firmly. He gave her a long look. You should. You deserve quiet. Peace. I'd rather have truth, she said. Even if it's messy. For a second, something flickered in his eyes. Admiration, maybe even love. You're not afraid of anything, are you? I'm terrified, she said. But I'm still here. He stepped closer, his hand brushing her arm. Then stay here. With me. She looked up at him. Is that a request or another order? A promise, he said. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and the rest of the world seemed to fall away. The lake, the danger, the past. For a moment, there was only warmth and the quiet certainty that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. When they finally pulled apart, she whispered, What happens now? He smiled faintly. Now, you rest. Tomorrow, we plan. Plan what? To finish what started the night I met you. As she looked into his eyes, she realized something had shifted. He was no longer just the man who had rescued her. He was the center of everything that would come next. Her safety, her choices, her heart. And though the future was uncertain, she felt, for the first time, unafraid. That night, the villa slept quietly. From the balcony, Lorenzo watched the lake until dawn, the faint trace of a smile on his face. He had built his life on control. But now he understood something new. Control meant nothing without someone worth protecting. Inside, Clara dreamed of the same horizon. Two lives caught between danger and desire, standing on the edge of something that could save or destroy them both. For 2 days, the villa seemed unusually quiet. Guards patrolled with less urgency, and the air no longer buzzed with tension. But the silence felt temporary, like the pause before thunder. Clara spent the mornings walking through the gardens. She tried to remind herself that peace was still possible, but her mind kept circling back to what Lorenzo had said. Someone higher up pushed Ethan into this. Whoever that was, they were still out there. Late that afternoon, she saw a familiar figure step from a black car in the courtyard. Her father. "Dad." She ran to him. He caught her in a tight hug, his hands trembling slightly. "My girl," he said, voice rough. "Are you all right?" When that man called. That man. Mr. DeSantis. He said you needed me here. She pulled back to look at him. "You came all the way from London?" He smiled. "Of course. You're my only family." Lorenzo appeared at the doorway, calm as always. "Mr. Wells, thank you for coming. It's safer here until I finish sorting the legal side of things." Her father turned to him. "I appreciate what you've done, but I'd rather take Clara home." Lorenzo's tone stayed even. "Home isn't safe yet." The older man frowned. "With respect, I don't like my daughter hidden away in some mansion. She has a life." "Which she'll still have," Lorenzo said. "Once I've cleared your name completely." Clara tried to ease the tension. "Dad, please. Just a few more days." Her father sighed. "You trust him that much?" She hesitated. "I do." Lorenzo inclined his head. "I'll arrange for you to stay in the guest wing. You'll be comfortable." After he left, her father looked at her closely. "You seem different. Is there something you're not telling me?" Clara forced a smile. "It's just been a strange few weeks. That's all." He studied her for a moment longer but said nothing. Dinner that night felt like walking through thin ice. Her father tried to keep conversation light, asking about the gallery, about London. Lorenzo answered politely but guardedly. At one point, her father said, "You've done a lot for my daughter. I don't know why, but I'm grateful." Lorenzo met his gaze. "Because she deserves better than the chaos she was pulled into." "And what do you get out of this?" her father asked bluntly. Clara's breath caught. Lorenzo smiled slightly. "Peace of mind." That answer seemed to satisfy him, for the moment. Later, when the house had quieted, Lorenzo found Clara in the library. She was sitting near the fire, lost in thought. "Your father loves you very much," he said. "I know," she replied softly. "He doesn't understand any of this." "He doesn't need to." She looked up. "You can't keep protecting me forever, Lorenzo." "I can try." "Then what happens when it ends?" He didn't answer right away. The firelight flickered over his face, throwing shadows under his eyes. "When it ends," he said finally, "you'll go back to your life, and I'll disappear from it." The words struck her harder than she expected. "You sound certain." "I'm certain of very few things," he said quietly. "But this, keeping you safe, was the one thing I meant to finish properly." She stood and crossed to him. "And after that?" He gave a faint, tired smile. "After that, you'll be free of all this." "That's what you wanted." She shook her head. "Maybe that was what I wanted before." For a moment, their eyes met, neither moving, both afraid of what would happen if they did. Then a sharp knock broke the moment. One of Lorenzo's men appeared in the doorway. "Signore, the files from Milan have arrived." Lorenzo's expression hardened again. "I'll be right there." When he looked back at her, the tenderness was gone, replaced by the familiar distance of control. "Go to bed, Clara," he said. "Tomorrow will be a long day." The next morning, Lorenzo was already gone. His absence left the house oddly still, and for the first time since arriving, Clara felt restless. By afternoon, Signora Rossi came to her room with a folded gown of deep emerald silk. "Mr. DeSantis asked that you wear this tonight," she said. "For what?" "There's a charity event in Milan. He would like you to attend." Clara blinked. "Attend? In public?" "Yes." She hesitated, fingers brushing the smooth fabric. Part of her thrilled at the thought of leaving the villa. Another part wondered why Lorenzo wanted her there at all. When the car pulled up to the hotel that evening, flashes of cameras sparked across the entrance. The marble lobby glittered under chandeliers, filled with people who looked like they'd never known fear. Lorenzo waited for her near the stairs, dressed in a black tuxedo. He looked every inch the man the city whispered about, poised, untouchable. "You look beautiful," he said as she joined him. "And nervous." He offered his arm. "Then hold on to me." Inside, the event was all polished smiles and murmured greetings. Clara stayed close to him, aware of curious eyes following them. A few guests approached, politicians, investors, people who greeted Lorenzo with careful respect. Every so often, he introduced her simply as Miss Wells, nothing more. Then came the moment she hadn't expected. A familiar voice cut through the hum of conversation. "Clara!" Her heart stopped. Ethan stood a few feet away, pale but alive. "What are you doing here?" she whispered. "I had to see you," he said quickly. "We can fix this, Clara. We can leave, start over." Before she could answer, Lorenzo stepped between them, calm but unmistakably dangerous. "This conversation is over," he said quietly. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "You think you own her now?" "I don't own anyone," Lorenzo replied. "But I do protect what's under my care." "Care?" Ethan laughed bitterly. "You mean control." Lorenzo's expression didn't change. "You're out of chances. Walk away." Ethan looked at Clara, desperation twisting his features. "He's using you. Don't you see?" "He's no savior, Clara. He's worse than me." She stared at him, feeling the last fragments of her old life crumble. "You lied to me, Ethan. You used my father. Don't make this about anyone else." His mouth opened, but no sound came. He saw something in her eyes, resolve, maybe even forgiveness, but not the kind he wanted. Lorenzo stepped closer, his voice low enough for only Ethan to hear. "If you value what's left of your life, don't look at her again." Ethan froze, then turned and walked out. The crowd around them pretended not to have seen a thing. Clara's hands trembled. "What did you say to him?" "Enough," Lorenzo said. "He won't come near you again. You can't just—" "I can," he said softly. "Because he doesn't understand any language but finality." She exhaled shakily. "You scare me sometimes." "You should," he said, not unkindly. "But never for the wrong reasons." Later, away from the crowd, they stood on the hotel's terrace overlooking the city lights. "You didn't have to bring me here," she said. "I wanted people to see you," he replied. "To know you're untouchable now." "Untouchable?" "It means you're under my protection, publicly. No one will dare use your name again." She turned toward him. "That sounds a lot like ownership." He met her gaze. "It's not. It's a promise." "Then say it plainly," she said. "What are we, Lorenzo?" For once, he didn't deflect. "Something that shouldn't exist but does anyway." "That's not an answer." "It's the truth," he said. "I've spent my life keeping people out. Then you walked in and refused to stay away." She felt tears sting her eyes. "I didn't plan any of this." "Neither did I," he said quietly. "But if I have to choose between losing control and losing you, I'll choose the first." He took her hands in his voice steady. "Whatever happens next, people will talk. They'll question why you're here, what you mean to me. Let them. I won't hide you." The noise of the city faded into the background. She looked up at him, realizing this was his way of saying something he couldn't say aloud. "You're impossible," she whispered. "So I've been told." He kissed her then, brief and certain, with a kind of confidence that made the world tilt for a heartbeat. When they parted, he said, "It's late. Let's go home." The drive back to Lake Como was quiet. Clara leaned against the window, watching the city lights fade into darkness. Her mind replayed the night, Ethan's face, Lorenzo's warning, the cameras flashing like lightning. When they reached the villa, dawn was beginning to lighten the sky. Before stepping inside, Lorenzo paused at the entrance. "Are you angry with me?" he asked. "I don't know," she said honestly. "You scare me, but you also make me feel safe. I can't decide which is worse." He gave a faint smile. "Maybe it's both." They stood there, the air cool around them, until finally she said, "You really meant it tonight, didn't you? When you said no one could touch me." "I always mean what I say," he replied. "And if someone tries again?" His eyes were dark but calm. "Then they'll learn what happens when someone ignores a warning." Clara didn't know whether to be reassured or terrified, but she knew one thing with absolute clarity. Whatever this was between them, it had crossed the point of no return. When she went to her room, she stood for a long time at the window, watching the sky brighten over the lake. The world outside was still dangerous, but inside these walls, something stronger was taking shape, a bond built not from safety, but from the courage to trust what scared her most. Downstairs, Lorenzo poured himself a drink and stared into the glass, thinking of everything he'd risked by making her visible to the world. He didn't regret it. For the first time in years, he didn't regret anything. The morning after the gala felt too bright. Sunlight spilled through the curtains, and Clara blinked against it, the memories of the night replaying in sharp fragments. The flash of cameras, Ethan's face, Lorenzo's warning that sounded almost like a vow. She dressed slowly and went downstairs. The villa smelled of coffee and rain. Outside, the lake was still, a mirror of perfect calm that didn't match the storm in her chest. Lorenzo was in the study, reading a folder of reports. His jacket was off, sleeves rolled up, a faint shadow of fatigue under his eyes. "You didn't sleep," she said. He looked up. "Neither did you." She crossed her arms. "You shouldn't have said that to Ethan. You scared him." "That was the point," he said quietly. "It's not your job to threaten people for me." He closed the folder and leaned back in his chair. "It became my job the moment you were targeted." "That's not protection, Lorenzo. That's control." His expression didn't change, but his voice sharpened. "Do you think anyone else would keep you safe? Do you think the law cares about a stolen identity, a forged signature, a man like Ethan? They'd bury it in paperwork. I stopped it from destroying you." "I never asked you to," she said, her voice trembling. "No," he said softly, "but you never asked me to stop either." The silence that followed was heavy. Clara turned away, walking toward the window. "I can't live like this, like a secret you're trying to manage." "You're not a secret," he said. "Then what am I?" she asked, spinning back to face him. For a moment, he said nothing. Then, slowly, he stood and came around the desk. "You're someone I can't ignore." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." He stopped a breath away from her, the tension between them thick and electric. "Do you regret what happened?" he asked. "No," she whispered. "Do you?" He didn't speak, but his hand came up, fingers brushing her cheek. "You think I have the luxury to regret anything?" She caught his wrist. "You can let go sometimes." He gave a soft, humorless laugh. "Letting go gets people hurt. And holding on to everything destroys you," she said. Something in his face shifted, a flicker of raw honesty. "I don't know how to do this," he admitted. "Then learn," she said quietly. For a long moment, neither moved. Then he leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't gentle, it was desperate, like both of them were fighting the same battle from opposite sides. When they broke apart, her breath shook. "That's not learning." "No," he said. "That's surviving." She stepped back, heart pounding. "You can't keep saving me if you're the one I need saving from." He watched her walk away, the sound of her footsteps fading into the hall. Clara spent the rest of the day in the gallery, trying to lose herself in work. But everything felt different now, the air thicker, the quiet louder. By late afternoon, she found herself back in the garden, sketchbook in hand. The clouds had gathered, heavy and dark, promising rain. Lorenzo found her there. You shouldn't be outside alone. I'm fine, she said, not looking up. Clara. Don't, she said sharply. Don't tell me where to go or what to do. You don't get to decide my life. He exhaled slowly. You think this is about control. It's not. It's about keeping you alive. Maybe I'd rather risk being alive than feel like I'm locked in a beautiful prison. Her words landed hard. He stood there for a long moment before saying quietly, Then I'll open the gates. Whenever you want to go, you can. She looked up, startled. You mean that? Yes. Why now? Because if I have to choose between losing you and keeping you here against your will, I'll lose you. Her throat tightened. You're impossible. He smiled faintly. So are you. The rain began to fall, soft at first, then heavier. She stood and met his eyes. You can't fix everything by fighting it, Lorenzo. He looked away toward the lake. No. But I can try. That night, she found him again in the study. Papers were scattered across his desk, the fireplace burning low. Signora Rossi said you haven't eaten, she said softly. He didn't look up. Not hungry. She came closer. I don't like this distance between us. Then stop running from me, he said. I'm not running. I'm trying to understand you. He looked up finally, eyes tired but still sharp. There's nothing to understand. I am what I am. No one is just one thing, she said. He smiled faintly. You make it sound simple. It can be, she said. He stood, closing the space between them. Then show me how. Their kiss this time was slower, quieter, filled with everything they hadn't said. When he pulled back, he whispered, You don't know what you do to me. Maybe I do, she said softly. Outside, thunder rumbled again, and the storm returned, wrapping the villa in sound. The storm cleared by morning, leaving the sky washed clean. The world looked new, but Clara knew better. Storms always left something behind. She woke early to voices downstairs. They were low, hurried. When she stepped into the corridor, she saw two of Lorenzo's men speaking in urgent tones. What's happened? She asked. They exchanged glances. Mr. DeSantis will explain. She found him in the office, standing by the window. He looked calm, but the tension in his shoulders told another story. What is it? He turned slowly. Someone inside the house passed information to the people who came after you. Her stomach dropped. How do you know? An intercepted message, he said. One of my staff sent details about the security schedule. Who? I'm not sure yet, he said. But we'll find out. Clara frowned. You think it's someone close? It has to be. That thought chilled her. Everyone here had been kind to her. The cooks, the guards, even Signora Rossi. The idea that one of them might be part of the danger made the walls feel closer. What can I do? She asked. Stay out of it, he said. This isn't your problem. But it is, isn't it? They came for me. His eyes met hers. Exactly why I don't want you involved. She crossed her arms. You can't keep me in the dark. He sighed. Clara. Please, she said. I'm not asking for control. I'm asking for honesty. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right. If I learn who it is, you'll know. That afternoon, the house felt different. Colder, quieter. People avoided eye contact. Even the air seemed heavier. Clara tried to distract herself with the paintings but couldn't focus. Around dusk, she found Signora Rossi arranging flowers in the hall. The older woman looked pale. Are you all right? Clara asked. Yes, dear. Just tired. But there was something off in her voice. Before Clara could press further, Lorenzo appeared at the end of the corridor. Clara, I need to speak with you. She followed him into the library. He closed the door behind them. It's Rossi, he said quietly. She's the one. Clara froze. That's impossible. She's been here since the beginning. I know. That's why she was trusted. Why would she do it? She has a son in debt, he said. They used him to get to her. Clara's heart ached. What will happen to her? She's already gone, he said. I sent her away before they could reach her again. Clara sank into a chair. Does it ever end? Not for people like me, he said softly. But for you, it will. She looked up. You keep saying that, but what if I don't want to leave when it's over? He paused, clearly caught off guard. You'd stay? Even after everything? Yes. He moved closer, his voice low. Then I'll have to find a way to deserve that. The honesty in his eyes left her speechless. Later that evening, she went to the terrace for air. The night was clear, the lake calm again. She could almost imagine the danger was gone. Then she heard footsteps. Couldn't sleep either? Lorenzo asked, stepping beside her. No, she said. Every time it gets quiet, I expect something else to go wrong. He nodded. That's how you know you've seen too much of the world. She smiled faintly. And you? I stopped sleeping years ago, he said. They stood in silence for a while. Then he said, I told you once that safety is a person, not a place. I didn't realize how right that was until now. She turned to him. Who's yours? He looked at her for a long time. You. Her heart stuttered. That's a lot of responsibility. He smiled faintly. I trust you with it. For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them hummed with something quiet and certain. You don't have to fight everything alone, she said softly. You can let me in. I already have, he said. He reached out, took her hand, and for the first time, she felt the full weight of what that meant. No more hiding, no more fear. Just the simple truth that they had crossed every line that once kept them apart. Back inside, the lights were low. He stopped at the bottom of the staircase. Clara. She turned. Tomorrow, I'll settle the last piece of this, he said. Then it's over. And after that? He hesitated. After that, we find out what's left when the danger is gone. She nodded, understanding. As she went upstairs, she glanced back once. He was still there, watching her, a shadow against the soft glow of the chandelier, half guardian, half mystery, and wholly hers. The next morning was unusually still. The lake outside looked like polished glass, the air cold enough to make every breath visible. But inside the villa, something restless stirred, a sense of waiting. Clara woke to find a note on her bedside table. Meet me in the library after breakfast. There's something you need to hear. Well, her heart skipped. Lorenzo rarely wrote anything. His instructions were almost always spoken. She dressed quickly, the unease in her chest deepening with every step down the hallway. When she entered the library, he was standing by the window, dressed in black, hands in his pockets. A faint bruise marked the edge of his jaw. You've been out, she said quietly. He nodded. I had to meet someone. Who? A man who owed me answers. She waited, but he didn't elaborate. Instead, he gestured toward the chair across from his. Sit, Clara. Something in his tone made her obey without question. He took a breath. I know who's behind Ethan. His name is Marco Bellini. He used Ethan as a front to move money under false identities. When that collapsed, he wanted to tie off loose ends. You, your father, anyone connected. Her fingers tightened on the armrest. So it's over now? Not yet, Lorenzo said. Bellini doesn't walk away from unfinished business. He wants leverage, which means he'll try again. Her throat felt dry. And what will you do? End it, he said simply. There was no anger in his voice, only certainty. That scared her more than rage would have. Lorenzo. He raised a hand. Before you say anything, I need you to do something for me. Your father leaves today. I've arranged a car to take him to the airport. He'll be safer back in London. Her eyes widened. You didn't even ask me. Because if I had, you'd argue. And I can't afford arguments right now. Her voice trembled. He'll think I'm sending him away. Then let him, Lorenzo said. Better angry than in danger. She stood abruptly. You can't just make these decisions for us. He met her gaze calmly. Someone has to. The words hung between them, cold and sharp. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Clara said quietly, What about me? You'll stay here. Until it's done. You're planning something dangerous. Yes. And I'm supposed to wait while you risk everything? He gave a faint, almost sad smile. You make it sound simple. But this is my world, Clara. I'm built for this. She shook her head. You don't have to be. He didn't answer. Later that day, she stood by the car as her father loaded his bags. I don't like leaving you here, he said. This man, he means well, but you barely know him. Clara forced a steady tone. He's done everything he can to keep us safe, Dad. Her father looked at her closely. Safe or trapped? She swallowed. Sometimes it feels like both. He sighed, resting a hand on her shoulder. If you ever need to come home, I'll be waiting. I know, she whispered. When the car pulled away, she stood in the courtyard until it vanished from sight. Then she turned to find Lorenzo watching from the doorway. You did the right thing, he said. Maybe, she said softly. But it doesn't feel like it. That night, the villa was too quiet. Lorenzo had retreated to his study, surrounded by maps and files. Clara wandered through the halls, unable to sit still. When she finally gathered the courage to knock on his door, it was nearly midnight. Come in, he said. The room was dim, lit only by a single lamp. Papers covered the desk, a map of Milan spread out beside a gun she tried not to notice. You're going after him tonight, she said. He didn't deny it. Let me come with you, she said suddenly. He looked up sharply. Absolutely not. You can't do this alone. I'm not alone. I have people for that. But they don't care about you, she said, voice breaking. Not like I do. That stopped him. He stood, walked around the desk, and cupped her face gently in his hands. Clara, if anything happened to you because of me, then it would mean you're not as untouchable as you think, she said softly. He smiled faintly. You're impossible. I learned from the best. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the air between them charged with everything unsaid. Finally, he said, Stay here. For me. She nodded slowly. Then come back. For me. I will. He kissed her once, brief, certain, as if sealing a promise, and then he was gone. Clara didn't sleep. She sat by the window, watching the lake shimmer under moonlight. The hours dragged by in silence. Just before dawn, the sound of engines broke the stillness. She rushed downstairs as headlights cut across the courtyard. Lorenzo stepped out of the car, dust on his coat, a small cut on his temple. He looked tired but alive. It's done, he said simply. What does that mean? Bellini's gone. His network will collapse by morning. She exhaled, relief flooding her. You kept your word. I always do, he said quietly. Then, without another word, he crossed the room and pulled her into his arms. For the first time in weeks, the world felt still again. Morning sunlight poured through the villa's tall windows, turning the marble floors gold. Clara woke to the sound of birds and the distant hum of life returning to normal. When she found Lorenzo in the dining room, he was reading the paper as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Good morning, he said. You look calm, she said cautiously. He smiled faintly. It's over. The police will think Bellini fled the country. No one will come after you or your father again. She sat across from him, studying his face. You did it. Yes. Was it worth it? He folded the newspaper neatly. Ask me when I remember how to rest. They shared a quiet breakfast. For the first time, there was no tension in the air, no unseen threat lurking beyond the walls. And yet, Clara felt a strange emptiness. The danger had been their constant shadow. Without it, the silence felt too large. "What will you do now?" she asked. "Rebuild," he said simply. "And you?" "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to go back to the gallery. Another part wants to stay here and see what life looks like without running." He looked at her thoughtfully. "Then stay until you know." Later that day, they walked by the lake. The gardens smelled of rosemary and rain. Clara paused at the edge of the water. "You said once that safe is a person, not a place. Do you still believe that?" He nodded. "More than ever." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe I finally found mine." He turned toward her. "Clara." Before he could continue, a faint sound broke the peace, the distant crunch of gravel. A black car approached the gate. Lorenzo's expression hardened for a split second before softening again when he recognized the driver. "Relax," he said. "It's over. Truly." The car stopped, and one of his men stepped out, handing him a sealed envelope. Lorenzo read it silently, then looked at her. "It's confirmation," he said. "The accounts have been cleared. Your father's name is safe. Legally, you're both clean." Clara let out a shaky breath. "Then it really is done." "Yes," he said softly. "For the first time in years, everything is finished." That evening, the villa felt lighter. Music played faintly from the sitting room. The staff moved without their usual hush. Clara stood on the balcony, the sunset painting the lake in shades of gold and crimson. Lorenzo joined her, 2 glasses of wine in hand. "To peace," he said, raising one. "To finally breathing again," she replied. They drank in silence, the quiet between them now comfortable rather than heavy. "You know," she said, "you never told me what you'll do when you stop fighting everyone else's battles." He smiled slightly. "Maybe I'll start fighting for something that's mine." "Like what?" He looked at her for a long time. "Like us." Her heart skipped. "You really think that can work?" "I think it already does," he said. "We survived everything designed to break us." She laughed softly. "You make it sound like we're invincible." He shook his head. "Not invincible. Just stubborn." She reached out, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "Maybe that's enough." Night settled quietly over the lake. They stayed on the balcony, listening to the soft ripple of water against the shore. Clara leaned her head against his shoulder. "What does it feel like?" she asked. "Knowing you've finally won?" He thought for a moment. "It doesn't feel like winning. It feels like starting over." "Do you know how?" "Not yet," he admitted. "But I have a reason to learn." She smiled, eyes closing. "Good." The stars came out, scattered and bright. For once, the silence didn't feel like waiting. It felt like peace. The next morning, Clara woke to birdsong and the faint sound of laughter from the kitchen. When she came downstairs, Lorenzo was sitting on the terrace, reading a book. "Good morning," she said. He looked up, smiling. "You slept late." "I think my body finally remembered how." "Then we're both healing," he said. She joined him, folding her legs under her chair. "So what happens now? No threats, no secrets." "Now," he said, "we live." The simplicity of the words struck her. "And if the past comes knocking again?" He looked out at the water. "Then we answer it together." Later, they walked down to the small boathouse by the shore, the one his grandfather had built. Inside, everything smelled of cedar and old varnish. "This place used to scare me," Lorenzo said quietly. "Too many memories. Too much silence." "And now?" she asked. "Now it feels like home." He turned toward her, his eyes soft. "I meant what I said, Clara. You can go anywhere, Do anything. You're free. But if you stay, I'll build something here worth staying for. Her chest tightened. You already have. For a moment, they just stood there, the light filtering through the wooden slats. Then she reached for his hand. No more running, she asked. Never again. They stepped outside, the sunlight warm on their faces, the lake gleaming like a promise. In that stillness, after months of chaos, Clara finally understood. Peace wasn't the absence of danger. It was choosing to stand beside someone even when danger might return. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of life at the villa began to change. The guards were fewer now, their presence less constant. Doors that once stayed locked were left open. Laughter returned to the hallways. Clara woke every morning to sunlight filtering through the curtains and the scent of espresso from the kitchen. For the first time in what felt like forever, her days belonged to her. Lorenzo spent most of his time rebuilding his business and cutting ties with the past that had nearly destroyed them both. But no matter how busy he was, he found her each evening, sometimes just for a walk by the lake, sometimes to share silent dinners where words were unnecessary. One afternoon, she went to the east wing, the gallery she had restored. The room was filled with light, every painting cleaned and rehung. She ran her fingers along the edge of a frame, smiling. "This place is beautiful again," a voice said behind her. She turned to find Lorenzo leaning against the doorway. "It's finished," she said. "Every piece repaired. Every mark erased." He stepped closer. "You did that." "We did," she corrected. He looked around the room slowly. "You've given this house back its soul." "And what about you?" she asked. "Have you found yours?" He smiled faintly. "I'm trying." Clara hesitated, then said, "I want to open it to the public. The gallery. Make it something more than a memory." He raised an eyebrow. "You want strangers walking through my home?" "It wouldn't be your home anymore. It would be ours. A place people can see beauty instead of fear." He studied her, then nodded slowly. "Then let's do it." Over the next few weeks, the villa transformed again. Workers came to install lights and glass partitions. Invitations were sent to Milan's art world. For Clara, it felt like stitching two worlds together. The quiet strength she'd found here and the independence she thought she'd lost. The night before the opening, she stood on the balcony, watching the lights shimmer across the lake. Lorenzo joined her, silent for a moment before saying, "Tomorrow changes everything." "For the better," she said. He looked at her profile, the wind stirring her hair. "You know, I built walls around this life to keep people out. You walked through them without trying." She smiled. "Maybe they weren't walls. Maybe they were doors you just never opened." He chuckled softly. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," she said. "But it's worth it." The next evening, guests filled the villa. Music drifted through the air. The gallery glowed under soft golden light. Clara greeted visitors with calm confidence, introducing each painting like an old friend. Lorenzo watched her from across the room, a faint smile tugging at his lips. She moved gracefully, unafraid, completely herself. When one of the guests, a journalist, approached him, he said, "Mr. DeSantis, people are surprised to see you opening your doors to the public. Why now?" He glanced toward Clara. "Because beauty deserves to be seen, not hidden." Later, when the crowd thinned, she found him by the window. "It worked," she said softly. "They loved it." "They loved you," he replied. She shook her head, laughing. "You make me sound like a painting." "You are," he said simply. "The one I never get tired of looking at." Her breath caught. "You shouldn't say things like that in front of reporters." He smiled. "I said it for you, not them." For a while, they just stood there, the murmur of the remaining guests fading around them. Clara looked out at the lights and said, "I feel like I finally got my life back." "You never lost it," he said. "You just forgot how to claim it." When the last guests left, the villa fell quiet again. They walked through the now empty gallery, the polished floor reflecting their steps. "You did all this," Lorenzo said, his voice low. You turned a place built on secrets into something honest. She smiled gently. Maybe that's how we both heal, by turning pain into something that lasts. He took her hand, pressing his lips against her knuckles. You've already done that for me. Outside, the night stretched wide and calm over the lake. Clara felt the faint tug of hope, the kind that didn't come from rescue or escape, but from belonging exactly where she was. The morning after the opening, the world seemed new. Newspapers carried photos of the gallery. Headlines called it a renaissance on the lake. The attention didn't scare her, it felt deserved. She was in the garden when Lorenzo came to find her. He looked unusually thoughtful, a small velvet box in his hand. You're quiet today, she said. Thinking, he replied. About us. He held out the box. Inside was a ring, emerald and diamond, the green deep as the dress she had worn the night they met. Her breath caught. Lorenzo. He looked at her steadily. I've built a life by owning everything. Businesses, decisions, power. You're the only thing I've ever wanted to share. Her eyes shimmered. You don't have to do this to keep me. He shook his head. This isn't about keeping you. It's about choosing you, every day, on your terms. She closed the box gently and took his hand. Then you already have my answer. He smiled, a real, unguarded smile she hadn't seen before. That's the first time anyone's ever told me no and made it sound like yes. She laughed softly, and he drew her into an embrace that felt like sunlight after a storm. Over the next few weeks, life settled into something almost ordinary. The villa became a place of laughter, not fear. Local children visited the gallery. Clara worked with art students from Milan, restoring old canvases. Lorenzo spent more time by her side, though he still handled the business that had once defined him. One evening, she found him sitting by the lake, staring at the reflection of the mountains. You look like a man with too many thoughts, she said, sitting beside him. He smiled faintly. Maybe I finally have time to think. About what? About what comes next. About who I am when I'm not fighting everyone else's battles. She nudged his shoulder. Maybe you start by being someone who doesn't have to fight at all. He looked at her, amused. And what would I do then? Live, she said simply. You've spent so long surviving that you forgot what that means. He was quiet for a moment, then said, You make it sound possible. It is, she said. You just needed to believe it. A few nights later, they hosted a small dinner for friends. The villa glowed with laughter and soft candlelight. Clara watched Lorenzo talking easily with guests, his usual reserve replaced by something lighter. When their eyes met across the room, he raised his glass to her. She smiled, realizing that this peace, warmth, shared joy was what they had been fighting for all along. After the guests left, they walked together through the silent gallery. The paintings glimmered faintly in the moonlight. Do you ever think about the night we met? She asked. Every day, he said. She smiled. It feels like a lifetime ago. It was, he said softly. You turned that lifetime into something new. She looked at him. You did that too. They stopped in front of a small portrait she had restored, a woman in a green gown, eyes serene. Do you see her expression? Clara said. That's what freedom looks like. Not running away, not hiding. Just choosing where you stand. Lorenzo nodded slowly. And where do you stand? She turned to face him. Right here. With you. He reached for her hand. Then we stand together. The next morning, Milan's art magazine published an article calling Clara Wells the woman who turned shadows into light. She laughed when she saw the headline, handing the paper to Lorenzo. They make it sound like I performed a miracle, she said. He looked at the photo of her in the gallery, smiling beneath the chandeliers. Maybe you did. Later, as they walked through the garden, she said, You know, I used to think safety meant hiding. Now I know it means standing still and letting life happen. He smiled. You've always been wiser than me. Maybe, she said. But you're catching up. That evening, they stood once more on the terrace overlooking the lake. The sun dipped low, painting the water in copper light. Lorenzo turned to her. You've changed everything here. Even me. She smiled gently. Change isn't the same as loss, Lorenzo. Sometimes it's just becoming who we were supposed to be all along. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the ring again. This time, he didn't ask. He simply slid it onto her finger. You don't have to answer now, he said. But I wanted you to have it. She looked down at the ring gleaming in the sunset. You already know my answer. He smiled. I wanted to hear you say it. She met his gaze. Yes. The lake glowed like liquid gold as evening settled. For the first time, Clara felt no fear of what tomorrow might bring. I used to think my story ended the night everything fell apart, she said softly. But it was only beginning. Lorenzo looked at her, the wind stirring his hair. That's how all stories worth telling begin. She laughed quietly. So what are we now? The calm after the storm. He shook his head. No. We're the reason it was worth surviving. The last light faded behind the mountains, and the stars appeared, clear, countless, unafraid. For a long moment, they stood in silence, two people who had built peace out of chaos, standing not as protector and protected, but as equals. And as the night deepened around them, Clara whispered the words she had carried since that first night in Milan. In your world of darkness, I didn't find a cage. I found my crown. Lorenzo smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. And I found my reason to keep the lights on. Every story leaves a mark, and if this one did, don't let it fade. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and walk with me through the worlds we've yet to uncover. There's more love, more betrayal, more truth waiting just beyond the next upload. You've made it this far. Stay for what comes next. The next chapter starts soon. And trust me, you don't want to miss the first line.